Welcome to the Cuckoo's Nest podcast. Our first guest for the year 2021 January, we have Pastor Daniel Baik, hailing from Houston. He has been education pastor for, 12 years?
Well, 12 and a half years in Houston.
Yes.
But before that, all combined is like 25 years or
25
longer.
years
Yeah.
of, was it in education?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
25 years of serving the Lord's churches as education pastor. And now, finally, in January of 2021, he has been called to MBC to assume the role of senior pastor. So we want to welcome him.
Good to be here. I don't know who's all listening or watching, but just want to say hi and glad to be here. It's a blessing to be a part of this. Yes, thank you.
You just arrived here at the end of December, was it?
Yeah, just 1 week before January 1st.
Okay.
So I came here Monday.
I remember you mentioning that.
It was raining and we saw the rainbow.
Yeah.
It was very, very clear and beautiful rainbow. So the day that we were arriving, it was raining. And just as we were entering Orange County, we saw this beautiful rainbow. It was just very, very beautiful, big, clear.
How was the journey? How was the drive? Did you get to do some sightseeing with the family? Or?
Well, it was from Houston to California, so we just took the I-10. It's the highway that crosses the United States, and we stopped by a few cities. We were bringing our third child, which is his name is Pluto, as you can imagine. He's a dog, that we adopted. Yeah. So that's one of the main reasons why we drove instead of flew. Because he's 26 pounds, and so it's so that's one of the reasons. But anyway, we stopped by Tulsa. Where else was it? There are a few other cities that we stopped by, and it was good. We didn't take a long drive. We just took 6 hours each day, so it took us 5 days, 5 nights, or something like that. But it was good. It was just good to spend some time. But as you know, a lot of things were closed down. And it was during the Christmas time. So, most of the things were closed down. But nonetheless, it was very relaxing. So overall, it was very good. It's just the final day as we were arriving, the rainbow just gave us the big welcome. So it was very, very good.
When I first met you, after I met you, I was telling my wife, it's like I'm meeting a grade school friend.
Oh, really?
That's what I told her, and then she said, "Well, that means that you like him."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh, that's great. I hope so.
I
hope that's the case." How does it feel to be a senior pastor finally after 25 years of serving the church?
Well, as I was growing up, I always wanted to be a pastor ever since I was a little child. So, being a pastor has always been in the back of my mind. And then I guess when I was really young, I thought being a pastor meant, senior pastor. But then when I start ministry when I was in 2021, I didn't really think, I'm going to be a senior pastor or education pastor or what have you. So it didn't really matter to me as long as I'm in a full-time ministry just serving God. But then as I get older, late 20s or so, the churches that I served, they all expected all the pastors to become lead pastor or senior pastor one day. So you are getting trained when you are 20s and early 30s. So eventually you will be a lead pastor position or senior pastor position. That was the kind of culture that I grew up with. Mm-hmm. So, I thought maybe, that's probably the way that I go. But then when I started doing the ministry in Seoul Baptist Church in Houston 13 years ago, that kind of changed my thoughts and my direction and vision, because the senior pastor at that time, Pastor Chai, was hoping and praying that people like me or, man figure will step into education pastoral role and do it for a long time, until he retires. Mm-hmm. Because we are, I do agree with them that we are in a great need for men to take the position in education, not only the pastoral position, but education as a whole. There's like 90% of all the school teachers are females. I don't know about California, but all the other places that I've been to, all the children's ministry are, majority of them are women. And nothing wrong with having a women children's pastor, but we need a little bit more male leadership in children's ministry, as well as the youth and as well as other education departments. So I thought, okay, if there is a need, I'll be more than willing. If there is a calling and if there is a need, I'm here to serve God, not necessarily become a lead pastor and what have you. So I was, doing that. So I was doing children's ministry for 12 and a half years in Houston. Then, of course, during those times, my friends and the pastors that knew me growing up asked me, questions constantly. Daniel, when are you going to start, start ministry? Or when are you going to start your own ministry? When are you going to start being a senior pastor and all those things? And thinking that was the way to go. And actually, that kind of motivated me even more to stay in children's ministry. And that just tells me, hey, that's why there are such a shortage in children's ministry, like the male children's pastor in all the churches in the world. So I was hoping that I can perhaps be the one who will retire as a children's pastor too. But then as I get older, like, when I was turning 40, mid 40s, I'm 47 right now. So like when I was turning 43, 44, 45, I was thinking, is this the way to go? I'm getting older, and will I be able to reach out to these little children the way that I used to when I was 20s and 30s? That was a little bit different because I'm getting old, and I was very energetic person. I was very upbeat and doing a lot of skits and, jumping up and down and all those kind of things that children's pastor do. But then when I start preaching to kids, I felt like I was preaching to the teachers more so than the kids. I was teaching and reaching out to the parents more so than reaching out to the kids. I have to preach to their levels. But then I felt like I was preaching to the teachers. And teachers were telling me that they are so blessed and they would get so touched by my sermons and all that. But then I don't know how the children's were receiving it, So that was the main one of the reasons why I felt like I need to kind of, move on to the next stage. So that was one reason. And then another reason for perhaps praying that I will be in a different position was because I wanted to reach out to multi-ethnic group of people. I don't just want to exclusively reaching out to Korean people. I love Koreans. I am Korean, but I think God wants us to make disciples of all nations. But my ministry was limited to just the Korean people. And I lived in Houston. So Houston is like one of the most diversified city. So there are my neighbors, my wife's co-workers, and my kids' friends. They're not necessarily all Koreans, and I want them to be invited to my church that I serve, and I want to reach out to them. So that was the main reason why I wanted it to move on to the next stage. Yeah.
I wanted our viewers to get to know you a little bit better, so I'm going to ask some questions about your background. I remember when you first came to our church, you came to do a 3-day revival.
Oh, yeah.
And during the revival, you spoke about your background when you came to the United States. So right now, we're both 1.5 for convenient definition, 1.5 generation pastor.
Okay.
Would you say that you're like more 1.3 or 1.6? Which way do you lean on more?
It's hard for me to say. I think it's for the viewers or the listeners to judge. Well, I definitely have an accent, but then the way that I'm thinking, my culture and my thoughts and customs and things like that is more, I wouldn't even say that I'm closer to second generation, because I feel like second generation Koreans have their own culture. It's not necessarily American culture. Second generation Koreans have their own culture and their customs and other things that are a little bit different from what's called, quote unquote, American culture.
Right.
So I don't know. I feel like sometimes I'm more Americanized than even second generation Koreans.
Right.
But then language wise, I guess I'm more closer to first generation. So I don't know. It's hard to say. It's 1.5. It's yeah, whatever you make out of it. Yeah.
Okay. So would you like to share? I mean, for me, the story of how you came to the United States and then you were dropped off in the East Coast, pretty much. Yeah. And with I forget the name of the gentleman that you lived with in the mountains. What was his name again?
Carl Powers. Yeah.
Carl Powers.
Yeah.
Wow. How long did you live with him?
1 year. Yeah.
Would you like to share some of that?
In order to share that story, we have to go all the way back to Korean War in 1950s. You know how the Korean War?
Okay.
And then American soldiers went to Korea to fight for our freedom. But then one of the sergeant, his name was Carl Powers, and he saw this houseboy. They called it houseboy. It's a kind of little Korean boys who runs around in the American soldiers camp, and they do
run errands.
Run errands and all, help out these soldiers whatever they want and things like that. So Carl took a notice of this one boy, and he wanted to help him. So he thought there's got to be a way to take him to United States so he can get educated. So he thought that was the best way to help Korea and get the leaders, right? So to make a long story short, it was almost like literally very, very hard and almost impossible to take a young boy during the Korean War to take him to United States. It's very difficult anyway. So that's what he did. He took far beyond what was expected and way beyond. So he took this boy to United States and helped him to go to school.
Let me pause it for a second.
Yeah.
Did Carl adopt this young man?
I don't think he adopted him, but maybe
there was some kind of arrangement.
Right, some kind of arrangement. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe not a proper, official adoption, but it's almost like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, so he took him to United States, and this boy went to Bob Jones University or Bob Jones College. That's very fundamentalist, right? Fundamentalist school, and he wanted to get a politics, but then he ended up becoming a pastor, and then after he became a pastor, he went back to Korea. So many of you probably have heard his name. His name is Billy Kim. So he was my senior pastor when I was growing up. So that houseboy who grew up to be a pastor and came back to Korea. So anyway, so the Carl was the one who helped him to be who he is today. And then so when Billy Kim, because he was my senior pastor, he knows my dad and he knows about my story, and he knew that I wanted to be a pastor ever since I was a little boy. So he helped me to go to United States. You see how it's a chain reaction? One soldier helped this houseboy, and then this houseboy helps me, and then so forth. So, this Billy sent me to United States, and he sent me to Carl, the American soldier, right? So Carl never been married. He passed away a few years ago, but he never been married, and he lived on this wooden area. It's like at the tip of Appalachian Mountain in Virginia. So, and he was a 7th grade English teacher, and he lived in the mountain. He built his own house. He had an outhouse, and he had a wood stove. He didn't even have a car, so we had to walk around. And it was, even though it was 30 years ago, it was a culture shock. It's even 30 years ago, Korea, I didn't use the outhouse, and you know what I mean. So, so it was quite a change.
did you live in the U.S. Continually since living with Carl?
Yeah,
Oh,
right,
wow.
right. Since so 30 years straight.
Wow.
And-
Since
but-
then.
Yeah, since then. But then,
Wow.
of course, I visited Korea, for summer, like for a few weeks and things like that. But that's not really. That was just visiting.
Mm-hmm.
But then, prior to that, just before I came to the United States, I never, spoke English really. 30 years ago, back in Korea, their public school English class weren't really that good. You know what I mean? So I wasn't able to speak at all. All I can say was, hello, my name is so-and-so. How are you? I'm fine. And you? Those type of, conversation.
Sure.
So it was very difficult for me to communicate. And even though I didn't know how to ask questions, and even if they answer some of my questions, I didn't understand. And so it was very hard for me to communicate. But as I said, I learned the culture, how to, do proper things. And I can go on hours and hours talking about that experience. Like even the churches that I went, their churches are, one of those movies where the southern pastors like preach like crazy, like that. Yeah, you know what I mean?
That's what I try to do on Sundays.
Oh yeah, nice try.
I try to do that on Sundays.
Maybe we should do that both. Maybe I'll do it in Korean and you do it in English.
I can't pull it off.
Yeah, so it was like that. So church was also culture shock as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, school, and I think it was a culture shock for them as well as for me, because they never seen any
Right.
Asian before in their whole life.
Right.
The entire school, and entire county for that matter. So they were so shocked to see this Asian boy who came from Korea,
Yeah.
and then he can't even speak a word of English. So they were very curious and they wanted to help. They were very friendly and kind, most of them. So I didn't feel any racism. Maybe I didn't know, but I didn't really feel like, there was any kind of racism or things like that. But they were very welcoming. They were very kind. They were very friendly. So I was able to, go to school. Yeah.
Did the initial time of the period of adjustments, I'm sure there was difficulty. Did it build your faith a little bit?
Oh, very, very much.
Oh.
Every single night I was crying.
Really?
As I was going to bed, I missed my family and friends like
Oh,
crazy.
my.
Yeah, you can imagine. You're living in the mountain, and with the 할아버지 and a dog. He had a dog, and,
Yeah.
and that was it. And every night, there's nothing out there. When you just go out, there's just wood.
I mean,
Yeah.
so when I hear your story, right?
Yeah.
I grew up reading Adventures of Tom Sawyer.
It's if it's not worse than that, it's like that. Yeah.
So I when I hear your story, I romanticize it.
Yeah.
I think to myself, wow, a boy of 16. I mean, what an adventure.
Yeah.
But for you, it was like a nightmare.
Well, it wasn't a nightmare. It was like an adventure.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was so lonely.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
So
okay.
that was the thing that helped me, because here is a boy who was hoping to be a pastor one day,
Yeah.
who will be a servant of God. You can think of it like that. And then, so I have a big dream, and Billy Kim was a big figure. So back then, I thought that I will become someone like Billy Graham. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And like Billy Kim,
sure.
Billy Graham. Yes, I'm gonna preach the gospel to the world, and all that stuff. So
okay.
I thought this is part of my training. Yeah.
Mission training.
Yeah. So in order for me to bloom and do that, so this is my training. So I'll be willing to take it in
Yeah.
and bring it on. But it was so hard because you are 16 years old, stuck in the woods,
Oh.
and I used the real axe to cut down the trees and split the woods every
Right.
day. That was the only way that we can get the warm water and get the fire going in the wood stove. So every day, even during the summertime, we have to burn the woods. So yeah, it was a training. I got poison ivy twice. I got stung by bee a few times, and all that was very painful. But once again, I thought I was getting trained.
I
So,
also
and it was a training. Yeah.
I also remember you said that you ate a lot of potatoes.
Oh yeah. I mean, Carl, you can imagine he was 61 years old, and
Oh.
he wasn't a great cook. He just lived by himself, so he
Right,
just
right.
ate the canned food and planted some vegetables like potatoes, and we ate potatoes all day. Sometimes I ate baked potato for breakfast, fried potato for lunch, and for dinner we just had leftover potatoes. So yeah.
After you grew older, were you able to go and visit him? And
Yeah, for a few times.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I wasn't able to attend his funeral. I found out later that, so it was a little too late, and it was very. I wish, I was able to attend, and that was one thing that I kind of wish that I was able to do. But
Wow.
yeah.
Wow, what a nice man that.
Yeah. He taught many kids in school, but he also went above and beyond, and helped out this stranger from another country.
Right.
And that, I'm sure he has a lot of rewards in heaven.
Yeah.
And
It's probably like a special assignment from God. God says,
Yeah.
you got to help that boy, and, and he listened
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
obeyed.
Yeah,
Hallelujah.
Yeah, even if you are helping one person,
Yeah.
and that one person can do so much, work for God, and every person is a precious to God.
I think our ESC members would be interested to know that while you were in high school, you played basketball, and you had an interesting story.
I never played the official kind of school team games. When you played basketball back in Korea 30 years ago, you just played on the streets with the boys, just like how you were playing soccer, out there in the field. So I didn't know the rules too much, and I didn't know the time. Like, they were playing 8 minutes each for 4 quarters, right?
Okay.
And I didn't even know that. The very first game, I thought we're just playing first half and second half. So after second period, I thought the game was over. When they all go into the locker room, I thought game was over, so I was taking off my uniform to take shower.
Oh.
But that was during the halftime.
Oh.
You know what I mean? So, but then I was the only one who's doing this. I was like, isn't it over? But then, there was a
awkward.
third period. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's like that. I
Yeah.
just have to constantly kind of watch other kids doing. It's because I didn't understand anything what they were saying. So, but then, that game, we went back and we were playing third period, and then we were playing fourth period. So I didn't know how long are we playing.
Yeah.
I was getting cramp, and I was dying. I was running so hard. But then that day, it was not just the one game either. It was a tournament.
Oh.
So we were
Right.
playing 2 games
Oh my.
and on the same day. So yeah, it was really like
Well,
I was.
at least you didn't speak English back then. I mean, I still do that. You gotta ask my wife. I still do things like that, even
Yeah.
though, another thing that was really poignant about the 3-day revival. I really wish that the ESC would have been able to take advantage of it. Was when you introduced your father, because the whole theme of the revival was the father's heart, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, would you care to share a little bit about your dad?
Yeah, speaking of that, I mentioned about Carl, right?
Yeah.
So in order to speak about my dad, I also have to go back to Korean War. And then there was another gentleman from Chicago. His name was Pastor Swanson. Pastor Swanson is the one who founded this nonprofit organization called Compassion. Many of you probably know about Compassion, and there's also another one called the World Vision.
Right.
Both of them started to help out the Korean orphans during the Korean War.
Yeah.
So many nonprofit organizations like that started because of the Korean War, and because of so many orphans were there in 1950s and 60s. But anyway, this Pastor Swanson went to Korea to help out the American soldiers at first, but then he noticed that there were literally hundreds of thousands of orphans in Korea. They're on the streets. So his heart was really broken. So he wanted to help out. So after he came back to Chicago, he was praying, and some people randomly sent him some support and letters to encourage him to go back. So he went back to Korea, and then he was helping out this orphanage in Masan, I think, and that was how he started sponsoring and supporting these orphans in this Korean orphanage, and that's how the compassion started. But then, how does that story connected to my dad? Is that my dad grew up with my dad's grandmother. Okay, his parents passed away when he was younger, so he was growing up with his grandma, and then one day this pastor stopped by and told the grandma and my dad that, hey, there's an orphanage right there. If you send your grandson to orphanage, then they're gonna help him to get educated, go to school. You can imagine 1950s, going to school was a luxury. So my dad, really wanted to go to school and get, study. So he said goodbye to the grandma, and then he went to this orphanage to study and go to school. He was just hoping that he can attend the school. And that's where he met Pastor Swanson. So Swanson wanted to sponsor this few orphans, and my dad was one of them. So he went to orphanage. My dad was sent to orphanage just to go to school. And then Pastor Swanson took a notice of few boys. So Pastor Swanson started sponsoring few orphans in the orphanage. Yeah. So my dad was one of them. So that's why he was able to go to school, attend, middle school, high school, and then was able to go to college, a Bible college. Oh. So he became a pastor, and then he started working for Compassion in Korea after college. But then those days, Compassion in Korea was to help the Koreans. But then as you know, the economy grew so fast and so big. So in early 19, I'm not sure what year, maybe 70s or 80s, the Compassion in Korea decided to close down Korea campus because Korea no longer needs help. They grew so fast, so they want to focus on other countries that needed more help. So they closed down the Compassion office in Korea. So my dad, started different ministry. He got into pastoring a church, as well as he started the nursing home. He made a nonprofit organization named after Pastor Swanson. So Swanson Remembrance or Memorial Nursing Center for the old folks who doesn't have kids to take care of them. So they didn't have anywhere to go, but it was free. Oh, so wow. The only way they can get in there was if you don't have any children to take care of them. Then they have nowhere to go, right? And we accepted those people, and so he's been doing that for 30 some years, and he retired. And then in those days, the Compassion went back to Korea, and this time not to help Koreans, but Korea will become like the headquarters. Mission and then Koreans will help out the other countries or surrounding countries. So they have a Compassion in Korea now, and we have a very close connection with them and good relationship with my dad and things like that. So that's my dad. And going back to that one person, the one man had a heart, went to Korea and helped out these orphans. And I am the product of that heart and compassion.
I wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit about your perceived role as the senior pastor of the next generation, as well as some of your ministry philosophy. I served. How many churches have I served as a pastor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, about 5 churches that I served within those 25 years. Okay, it was because in college I served 2 different churches, and then when I was in seminary I stayed. I don't move around churches much. I mean, within 3 years I served 2 different churches because I was in school, and it was I didn't have much choice. But then after
I went to seminary. I served in one church for 5 years. After seminary, I went to a full-time position in Washington, D.C. area for 6 years. And then I went to Houston for 12 and a half years. And then I came here. So anyway, so that means I served under first generation Korean pastors for 5 different churches and what have you, right? And then the second church, there was a leadership change within the same church. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, with all those years and experiences that I had, there are things that I learned. Oh, I want to do it like that. You know, that's the way to do it. And also, but then also, there are things, that shouldn't be done. You know, I don't understand, and I don't want to do it like that. Why, do lead pastors or the senior pastors are pressuring us to do things like that? There are pastors who never experienced the 부목사 or associate pastoral role and then just became a senior pastor. I don't think that's very healthy or that's very good, because they don't know what it's to be like under someone's leadership. And I had that for 25 years, maybe a little bit longer than I should have, but anyway, that taught me a lot. What to do as well as what not to do, right? So as I'm starting this leadership position as a lead pastor or senior pastor, I don't like the word senior pastor, that just makes me feel like I'm old. Yeah, but anyway, the lead pastor, it sounds better, but anyway, as I'm starting this position, before I started, as I was preparing, as I was planning and praying about this, start of new journey, I kind of made a list of things not to do. You know what I mean? I made a list not to spoil myself, for example, not to be in a position where I feel so comfortable receiving and being served by other people. I think it requires a lot of discipline not to be spoiled, because once you become a lead pastor, everybody will try to help you and serve you and do things for you, and so it's so easy to be in a position where you take things for granted. I mean, you do really pray for them and serve them. So there are, because of lack of time and lack of energy that you can only put it into, certain areas, that there are people who needs to help you and do things like that. But at the same time, I have to really discipline myself not to be spoiled. You know what I mean? So that was one thing that I really kind of thought to myself before I started this ministry. And then there are a few other things. But then I only started for 3 weeks, right? Yeah. It's only been 3 weeks or less, and it's challenge. Yeah. I mean, the things that I don't want to do before I started, I might be doing it already. You know what I mean? Things that I don't want to do.
That's interesting.
You know what I mean? But since I became one, I'm already doing. I have to be very, very careful and very, I have to watch out for myself.
Sure.
Not to do the things that I kind of promised to myself that I will not do. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's a challenge. So it's because I never been in this position. I guess it's a different perspective. Watching the lead pastor position from bottom is different than being up there, and it may not be the right term to say that it's up there, but or you can say down there, whatever you want to say. But yeah, I hope you understand what I mean.
I think I get you.
Yeah, so I'm trying to learn and trying to kind of discipline myself to be consistent and just be how I used to be and how I want to be, just consistent.
We're talking about the future of the Korean immigrant church, as you are one of the 1.5 generation senior pastors. What do you see? What do you forecast in the future, like 10 years down the line?
Well, immigration itself Koreans immigrating from Korea to United States or any other countries, I think that kind of paused or stopped.
Right.
America is not necessarily a better country to live than Korea. So there's no point of coming here, risking everything you have. Not as much as it used to be,
Right.
like 40, 50 years ago, it was like American dream, but there is no, I don't know, that dream is not as same as how it used to be. So you can have a dream anywhere in the world now. You can have the Korean dream in Korea, and wherever you are, it's all somewhat connected. So you don't necessarily have to immigrate to this country. So immigration itself kind of paused or decreased dramatically. So speaking of Korean churches in the United States or in America or any other countries, so no more Koreans are coming, you know what I mean, from Korea.
It's much less than before.
Yeah, much less than before.
Yeah.
They might be visiting or sending kids to school perhaps, but even that is kind of paused nowadays. But anyway, so but then your pool, I guess, your fish, so to speak, is limited.
Oh,
then
are we talking about fishing like fishers of men?
Yeah,
Okay.
like that. Yeah, but then
Like Pastor Eric from New Life. He
yeah.
loves fishing.
Yeah, he does. But then Jesus' calling is not necessarily to reach out just to Korean,
Right.
to make disciples of all nations.
Yeah.
So I think Korean American churches in the United States have their own history. It's been more than 100 years. And they have resources, they have people, they have been educated. So they have all the resources that they need to make disciples of all nations. But what I do see is many churches in the United States, Korean American churches, they are so eager and they are so passionate about world mission. So they are willing to send the missionaries overseas, and they're willing to support like North Korea, and they're willing to support, send people to Africa, send people to South America or Amazon, jungle, or anywhere, right?
Sure, yeah.
But then they're not so good about reaching out to their next door neighbor.
Yeah, we're shy about that.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe wherever you are in United States, that's your mission field.
Yeah.
And I really believe coming to Orange County, California, I thought this was one of the mission fields
Sure.
in 21st century.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Think about all these people who don't know Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And this perhaps is somewhat like today's Sodom and Gomorrah,
Oh yeah.
So it is a mission field. You can call me a pastor, but I think you can also call me a missionary.
선교사님.
Yeah. So you have to start from Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of Korean American churches, I think it's your responsibility. It's our responsibilities, as well as we also have resources. If you can send people to Africa, why can't you send people to your next door neighbor?
Yeah.
It's just matter of your comfort zone. You have to break out of that.
Yeah. Our church actually, since we have house church, it's so easy to invite our neighbors. And
Right, but then
have a feast.
Korean churches, they're only inviting Koreans in
Yeah.
your community.
That's right. It's limited that way.
Right. So I think that's when 1.5 generation lead pastors come in.
Yeah.
I think their vision should not be just to reach out to Koreans and to help out the second generation Koreans. Their vision should be to reach out to all nations within your community. And but then the second generation Koreans, where do they step in? I mean, they do have their own church and they are trying to make multi-ethnic and things like that. But then when I look at them, surprisingly, many of the second generation Korean churches are reaching out to second generation Koreans more so than
Right. It's
any
very
other.
cliquish.
Yeah, very narrow.
Very
yeah.
cliquish, yeah.
So I was like, that's why, in the beginning I said second generation Koreans have their own culture. And whether they admit it or not,
Right.
that's how I view them.
Yeah.
And, they might be saying something different, but the area or the people that I want to reach out, I will welcome everybody, of course, but if you want to be very specific about the people group that I want to reach out, are like those people, like perhaps 1.5 generation from all different countries. You know what I mean? Not just Korea, not just Asia, but South America or Africa or Europe or any other countries. People are coming from all over. And many of them can understand English and they can communicate.
Right.
Of course, their first language might be their mother tongue,
Right.
but they can still understand and communicate and worship God in English. So those are the people that I want to reach out, because these American churches, like your so-called white church or black church or a Korean American church, they are very limited to their own people group.
Right.
And so there are actually churches, I don't want to keep calling like white church or black church, and I don't know what would be the politically correct term for those churches, but let's say this American church, they are trying to reach out to a different group. So I know this one church that hired Korean pastor just to reach out to Koreans. So they start Korean language service within this American church. But that's not the kind of church that I am looking for, because if you want to do that, then why don't you just support the Korean church, somewhere next door? You know what I mean? Instead of starting your own. I think there's got to be a church where everybody can worship in same language. And in America, it's going to be English.
Right.
It's not going to be even in Spanish. And even in Orange County, I heard that Orange County, the Korean is like the second language, but it's not going to be in Korean either. It has to be in a common language where all different ethnicity and different cultures can communicate with each other. So, best language at this point is English here in America. So it has to be that language, and it has to reach out to this different culture. They can bring their culture, they can bring their customs and all those things. But I think I want everyone to feel comfortable. It may not be ideal, it may not even be possible, it may not be even necessarily better than the other ones, but that's kind of what I want to try. That's the kind of church that I envision. Because I haven't really seen church like that at this point, it's hard for me to say that that's the way to go. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Koreans meeting together with the Koreans. And praise the Lord, that's a good, and that God has blessed those churches. And Chinese meeting together with Chinese, and all these different ethnicity meeting together with their own people group and worshiping God. That's hallelujah, that's praise the Lord. But then I also see the church where these different people can get together and worship God, and church reaching out to all these different people and welcoming those people. I actually kind of saw this one church in Houston. It was a Salvation Army church. And you know how Salvation Army reaches out to the community and helping out the poor and people who are in need. So they were doing that, and they were not just helping out the people financially, but that was a church. So people from the community who's been helped, they come to church and worship. In that church, there were 27 different flags hanging in the gymnasium, because that represents all the people in the congregation. 27 of them.
All nations.
27 different flags. And their congregation weren't that big. It was only about less than 150. So 150 people from 27 different countries coming together to worship, and of course they do it in English. But that's the kind of church that I'm kind of envision. And when that happens, these 27 people from 27 different countries, they feel comfortable because there are other cultures. It's not just one or two predominant people group in the church, but there are many, many different cultures come together. That's the kind of church that I want to kind of envision and want to get involved.
That's actually my dream too.
I'm not saying that every church should be like that. I'm not saying that at all.
No.
But I think there is a power and there is a need for those kind of churches to bloom and
Yeah.
reach out to the communities.
Yeah, it is the biblical vision.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
also
yeah.
I think the Korean churches should be doing. I think it's long overdue for a
Yeah.
lot of Korean American churches who's been blessed so much and who has all these resources. Why not use out to, reach out to other people group instead of just reaching out to your own.
Yeah, yeah. I think it starts with like who our friends are.
Yeah, yeah.
When I look at my list of friends,
Yeah.
do I have a diverse group or have I been exposed? We just generally kind of stick to our own routine, so it really limits our. So far, we covered your ministry philosophy. You definitely want to branch out more than just being a Korean church senior pastor. You want to go the extra mile, and you want to really reach out to the neighbors, different generation, maybe even different socioeconomic classes.
So that's why I'm excited about you, Pastor Koo, is that you're trilingual. You can speak to, you can speak Spanish, Korean, and English. That's very rare, and I think you can hold me accountable because right now 100% of my congregation are Koreans.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I might be having a wishful thinking. All these people who are not willing to change. If I have to break through, and then, it's not necessary. I'm kind of struggling in between. Is this my vision or is this God's vision? You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
If God brings Korean people, I'm not gonna say no.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
No.
So if they keep on coming, what can I do? Preach the gospel. So, is it my vision or is it God's? If it's God's vision, I'll say hallelujah and I'll go for it and do all that I can. And if God brings more people from different ethnicity and different group, praise the Lord, and I'll do that. If God brings me just Koreans, if it's God who's doing it, then I'll say hallelujah and praise the Lord, and I'll reach out to these Koreans.
Yeah.
So, that's where I am.
Yeah. So you definitely have an advantage that you're an English speaker. So that's already a giant leap into the vision that God has for the church.
And hopefully I won't forget. You know what I mean? The one thing about language is if you don't practice, if you don't use it, even your mother tongue, or even if you are natives, you lose your language. So right now, this podcast is really good for me too. This is where I speak English. Other than this, I only speak Korean ever since I came here to California.
Is there something specific that you would like to say to the ESC?
Well, that was it, and I envision ESC to step in, and I think it's good.
Mobilized.
You, as you said, who are your friends?
Yeah.
Are you only becoming friends to people just like you?
Yeah.
Like the Koreans who grew up in Orange County, who has the exact same culture and things like that. What about your school friends?
Right.
People who live next door.
Right.
What's stopping you from reaching out to them and being their friends?
Right.
And things like that.
Yeah. And also, do you have any unbeliever friends?
Yeah. So you gotta be open and reach out. Let Christianity, be in your life, not just in your head. It's not a philosophy; it's a way of life.
Okay.
So, let's live it.
Let's briefly talk about your family, Nathan and Chloe and 사모님. Yeah. So Nathan is 4th grade, and Chloe is 9th grade. How are they adjusting to the school and everything else?
Yeah, Nathan was born he was made in Texas. He's Texas from.
He's a Texan.
Yeah, he's a Texan.
Yeah.
And all his friends are in Houston, so it was very, very hard for him to leave everything and just come to California. Even though it's California, he, for him, it's all about his friends.
Yeah, of course.
Even though he's 4th grade.
Yeah.
So it was very hard. He cried like he was wailing. He was like
Oh,
out loud when he
sure.
first heard that we are moving.
Uh,
So it was hard for him. But after that initial cry and wailing, I think he got better, and he's
That's
gotten
okay
much
now.
better, and he's getting adjusted. But we only been here 3 weeks, and most of them is online, like
Oh, yeah.
school and all that. So
Yeah.
he didn't have an opportunity to make friends yet,
Of course.
and so is Chloe, my daughter. So both of them, I guess we spend more time with our own family. But I'm hoping and praying that they will be able to make good friends sometime really soon, so they can adjust.
How is the schedule for you right now? At the pace that you're going, is it manageable? Are you adjusting okay?
Well, right now because of this special early prayer meeting for 7 weeks,
Yeah.
and that's of course taking up all of my time.
Energy.
Yeah, because I have to
Yeah.
prepare the sermon for every
Sure.
single day
Sure.
for 7 weeks. So that's a very challenging yet very blessing. But I have to really push myself hard and discipline myself to spend time with my family.
Yeah.
So for example, Monday is my day off, even though I do the early prayer meeting.
Yeah.
So yesterday I kind of forced myself to watch a movie with my family.
Oh.
We watched a Disney movie called Soul.
Oh, is it good?
Yeah, it was okay. It was okay. But anyway, so like something like that. That was the first movie that we watched in long time.
Okay.
But I really have to kind of prepare in advance and push myself so that I get to spend time. Watching a movie together you may not think that it's a quality time, but just being there together,
sure.
laying down in a sofa with the family and just watching the same thing and can talk about it afterwards. That's a quality time too.
Yeah.
And then some afternoons I take them out to the park, and you're in California, you go to 30 minutes away, you have a beautiful beach. So we try to do that a couple of times in the past 3 weeks. So yeah, it's a struggle. It's not easy, but something that I have to push myself to do it.
How is I realized that coming from Texas with 사모님, you have moved into a significant downsize. How is she adjusting to that?
Yeah, it's because we were preparing mentally.
Yeah.
California,
Mission
everything.
mindset.
Yeah,
Yeah,
California, everything's so expensive.
Yeah.
We were searching on Google some of the houses. Texas is, I guess it's one third the price of the houses in California.
Wow.
Yeah,
1/3. Wow.
it's almost like that.
Now I can see why people move there.
Yeah, it depends on where you live, but
Yeah.
still, it's like you can get a really decent size, nice single house for around $300,000, like big size homes, like 3,000 square feet or more. So, yeah, California here, you cannot get anything.
It's crazy over here. It's crazy.
Yeah. So I guess we were preparing ourselves. Yeah. We gotta just get ready, So because we were preparing, once we moved in, we were kind of surprised how the church were so generous in preparing this place for us. So we are very thankful. They painted the whole house inside, and they put the new floor and things like that. So it was very, very thankful.
And the commute's nice. It's a short commute.
Very short. It's like 4 minutes away from the church. So it's very convenient.
Well, I think that we'll have you again. Thank you for being the first guest of the new year, 2021.
It was my pleasure.
Even though we have the coronavirus pandemic, you have so graciously agreed to come into the office and share this space with me. Though we have this little protection barricade. And I'm sure there will be an ongoing discussion. I expect to learn a lot from Pastor Daniel, and hopefully we'll be able to bounce ideas and also not just talk about ideas, but to really go into action, do things together. That will be really exciting chapter being opened for MBC. Are there any last minute comments that you would like to make?
Well, it was my pleasure. I felt very comfortable, and I hope that everybody can understand my English. And I'm looking forward to have more conversations. I think just you and I just talking about ministry and church and things like that. I think that's gonna help us a lot, as well as hopefully help some other churches and other pastors in ministry. So yeah, it was my pleasure. I'm looking forward to do something like this more often.
It will be fun. Thank you very much. Wow.
All right, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yes.